Welcome back to Squawk Box. Join us now, Larry Kudlow, White House National Economic Council Director. Been a while, Mr. Kudlow. It is great to have you on this morning. I'm going to start with like a philosophical question, Larry. You've been there a while. I don't know if you were ever what I'd refer to as a globalist, but at this point, do we have a domestic economy that can continue to outperform? And we have for years, admittedly, but it seems more important and more true now than maybe in the past, that we really need to look at what's happening specifically in our country more than being bogged down by a global slowdown. Is it more true now than before, do you think?
I think you're asking me, is the domestic economy strong enough to withhold the global downturn, Joe?
Yes.
Yes. Well, the answer is yes, and I'll back that up in a minute. But I'm not a purist on this. You know, international trade is very substantial. So we've had some headwinds, particularly in the past year. The economy is a little softer in the second and third quarters. And a lot of that comes out of Europe. By the way, a lot of the European slowdown is centered in Germany. We can't export our manufactured goods because Germany is doing so badly. So that's an issue. Brexit, a smaller issue, Joe. Major China slowdown. I'm sure we'll get to that in a minute. Latin America slow. On the other hand, I will defend what's going on in the domestic economy because despite a very severe Fed tightening last year, maybe we're coming out of that now. Nonetheless, lower taxes and deregulation and opening up energy. We're still plugging along. You know, there's a statistic, my pal Steve Moore in the Journal, in 2.5 years, the Trump economy, people are getting about $5,000. $5,000. This is median income, Joe. Ordinary folks, $60,000, $65,000 a year, married, filing jointly. $5,000 from better labor conditions, huge jobs and income, and another $2,500 on tax cuts. That's a huge gain. The prior administrations, both Democrat and Republican, have nothing compared to that. So that has been driving the economy. As I said, there's some softness right now. But no, I think the domestic economy is in very good shape. I think the worst of the Fed tightening, by the way, is coming to an end. And I'm kind of optimistic. The year-end quarter should be pretty good. 2020 should be pretty good. So we're not immune, Joe. Okay. We are not immune, but I think we are still the driver. We are the international driver.
Our friend Steve Leisman, and he's, you know, he has different ways of gauging things, and maybe through some tea leaves thinks that it's possible the Fed could be thinking about a pause in the rate cuts. You're saying that they're finally doing the right thing, and I assume that you mean that they're going to continue cutting. Do you think that there's a possibility the Fed could be considering a pause because of seeing strength, and would that be a negative in your view for the economy and for the markets?
Well, you know, I look at the money market indicators and I look at the yield curve indicators. So here's the good news. The yield curve at the, let's see, 10s versus bills, 10s versus 2s, has now finally moved back into a normal position. So it's right size. Long rates are now above short rates. Not by a lot, but by some. That's a good sign. I think money market futures, Fed fund futures, correct me if I'm wrong, they're all predicting another 25 basis points at the Fed meeting, or reduction at the Fed meeting.
That's correct.
I concur with that. I think that's wise. Jim Bullard of the St. Louis Fed, I think, who won 50 at the last meeting, I'm sure he will be pushing for 25, maybe 50 again this time. And they're moving in the right direction. Their balance sheet is starting to expand a little bit. I don't want to get into a lot of Fed bashing. They do the best they can. Their models are highly flawed. The deep state board staff, of course, has not been helpful. Oops, did I say that? But the fact is, the Fed is moving us in the right direction. So, yeah, we're going to see some lower rates. And by the way, that's a global phenomenon, Joe, right? Lower rates all across the world, maybe saving the rest of the world from a recession. If you look at the timing, it's sort of interesting. So we took some hits in 2019. Economy was softer. A lot of that goes back to severe Fed tightening and some other issues. I get that.
Hey, Larry,
but now it looks like the housing sector is leading us back up. That's a pretty good leading indicator.
In a trial where one side will bring up something that the prosecution wants them to bring up. You brought up deep state. How do you view this whole Ukraine impeachment push, Larry? Is that a deep state move, or is there something that the average American should be worried about in terms of the phone call and what's going on with impeachment?
Well, I don't think the average American's in the deep state, so that's the really good news out there in America. Look, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this impeachment business. I'll just say this, Joe. I read the transcript of that phone call between Ukraine President Zelensky and U.S. President Trump. I've read it, I don't know, 15 times. I first saw it at the UN. I don't see anything remotely that would constitute it some kind of impeachable offense. Look, it was a congratulatory call. Corruption came up. Zelensky, who we met at the UN, we had a great bilateral with him, is a very bright young man. He said corruption is a big issue. I think President Trump was saying, why don't you help clean up the last, 2016, 2015, 2014. I don't think President was aiming at 2020. And I want to make this point. For 3 years or so, President Trump has said Europe must help the United States with respect to NATO and other related military assistance. And so what the president was doing, and it's clear in that transcript, is he's saying, I want to go back, protect taxpayers, and then let's see if we can get your assistance going, which ultimately is what happened. It was completely transparent. We released the transcript. We released the highly flawed hearsay impeachment complaint. We released that transparently.
Larry, then explain the role of Rudy Giuliani. Then explain the role of Rudy Giuliani and his two associates now who've been indicted.
I don't want to explain that. I guess that's Andrew asking that question, my friend Andrew from the Upper West Side. It's good to see you, my friend. And I don't want to explain it. I'm not acquainted with all of these machinations. It's out of my lane and probably above my pay grade.
Larry, let me ask you a different question, though.
All I'm saying is, hang on, all I'm saying is, when we released the transcript, we were transparent. We released the whistleblower complaint, which was really third and fourth hand hearsay. We were transparent. There was never any quid pro quo. The president never linked the two. His concerns about assistance was, why doesn't Europe pay its fair share of cost share burden? And President Zelensky, again, we spent a lot of time with him at the UN. He's a very bright fellow. He said there was never any pressure.
Larry, I'm trying to be polite by letting you provide a fulsome answer, but there are obviously people who have a different view than you do on this issue.
I understand that. I'm just giving you my point of view. I don't see anything remotely close to an impeachable offense. That's all.
And you're not troubled by any of it, just so we're clear.
Any of what?
There's nothing about what the president has either done or his associates in relation to the Ukraine that you're troubled by in any way whatsoever.
There is nothing the president has done with respect to that phone call and related matters. The associates, you can go to the second and third and fourth and fifth rings of Saturn, Andrew, and I'm not acquainted with it. I don't follow it.
Let me ask you a separate question, because I think a lot of people, since you do know
to deal with the economy.
Since you do know the president, though, so very well, there were a lot of people that saw that letter that the president wrote on White House stationery yesterday to President Erdogan of Turkey and couldn't believe their eyes. They couldn't believe what was being said. Was that normal to you?
I'm not sure what specifically you're referring to.
There was a letter in which the president, I will go get the letter, wrote to Erdogan, in which he effectively it
was a colloquial type letter where he said, "Make a deal, or else, you're." It was in very plain spoken language.
Well, look,
I think you know the letter that I'm referring to.
Yes, I'm aware of the letter.
Okay.
Look, that's Mike Pompeo's turf. It's not my turf.
Okay.
I believe in conversations with the president, he is trying to warn Turkey not to cause trouble in Syria and with respect to the Syrian Kurds and other parties.
I appreciate that, but the threats and the language and the type of approach that he, I mean, people looked at that letter initially and thought it was a fake letter.
Well, not everyone.
I mean, I think a lot of people did.
Well, now you're speaking.
Yeah, I mean,
I will speak for what I imagine. Actually,
if we're still in the trial, there'd be an objection, and that'd probably be sustained.
Yeah, there would be an objection. Thank you, Joe. Look, Secretary Mnuchin made it very clear over the weekend. We will use sanctions, and we may use more sanctions to keep Turkey in line. Look, can we just get – look, here's the point, fellas. I know we don't have all day. We're seeing a lot of the headwinds that held down the economy this year may wind up opening the door to next year. One of them's the China deal. Okay. You all have mentioned that. We also have the U.S.
You got to toss it to your old partner, Larry. I apologize. We got to go to Kramer. It's 9:00 and his friends, Carl and David. We got to go. Thank you, Larry. We appreciate it. I'm sorry to cut you off, but it's straight up at 9.